My name is Ines, and today I'm going to talk about a new past tense form, which is called das Plusquamperfekt. And of course, when I say a new past tense form, first you want to know, what do I use this past tense form for? I already know some past tense forms. And really, the Plusquamperfekt is very easy, and it's pretty useful and pretty cool, because you use it to describe an action that took place prior to another action that already happened in the past. Okay? I brought you a timeline to make this make more sense. So right now, we're of course in the present. You have the Präsens here. Okay? And there's a future tense, the Futur in German and in any other language, because we have to be able to talk about the future. And then you already learned the Perfekt and the Präteritum, two past tense. Sometimes we say that the Perfekt is more the conversational past and the Präteritum the written past. Okay? So those are the two you already learned. And today we talk about the Plusquamperfekt. And in this timeline you see it's further in the back. So it's talking about something that happened before something happened in the Perfekt or in the Präteritum. Okay, how do you build a Plusquamperfekt then? And it's really, I promise you, is probably the easiest past tense you're going to learn because you already know how the perfect works. Okay? If you remember, a perfect sentence, for example, would be Simon hat Hausaufgaben gehabt, so Simon had homework. And you have the auxiliary, hat, and you have a past participle, which in German we call das Partizip, which is in blue here, gehabt. And you remember you had to learn all these participle forms, but once you have them, they always stay the same. Okay? So for the perfect, all you had to do is conjugate the auxiliary, which in German we call the Hilfsverb. And I hope you remember there were two. There was sein and haben. And sein, for example, we used was motion verbs that had a direction. So I hope all that comes back to you. This isn't about the perfect. This is just a really quick review. And the reason the Plusquamperfekt is so easy then is because it actually follows the exact same structure. The only difference is that now the auxiliary is already in the past. So for the perfect past tense, the one you already learned before, you put the auxiliary in the present tense. You would say, ich habe ein Buch gelesen, or ich bin Auto gefahren. Okay, habe and bin is present tense. Whereas now, because we go further back in the time, we simply put the auxiliary in a past tense form, and that is the Präteritum form that you've already learned as well. Okay? So let's look at this. Your Hilfsverb, your auxiliary, could then either be a form of waren or hatte. And you still have the participle, and these are the exact same participles as you learned for the perfect. I just listed three here because we have the three categories, if you remember. We have the weak ones that end on a T, for example, gemacht, from machen, to make. Gefahren, these are the strong ones that end in en. So here we have he drove, or drove past tense. And we have those mixed ones that end with a T but have a stem vowel change. So for example, from the word bringen to bring, gebracht. And again, these are just the exact same ones for the Plusquamperfekt. So just so you remember, now that you have to put the auxiliary in the Präteritum. Okay, so our sentence we had earlier, Simon hat Hausaufgaben gehabt, would then simply turn into Simon hatte Hausaufgaben gehabt. Because all you do is take your auxiliary that was in present tense in the perfect and move it one step further back, so you use the Präteritum, and now instead of hat, you get hatte. Very straightforward. And in case you don't completely remember your irregular verbs, sein and haben, in the Präteritum, I'll just brought them here for you again to look at. Sein, to be, in the Präteritum is ich war, du warst, sie, es war, wir waren, ihr wart, and sie waren. This is irregular, and you probably had to learn these forms when you learned the Präteritum, but you already learned this before, so it's not new. This is just a quick review. Okay? And then for haben, to have, ich hatte, du hattest, sie, es hatte, wir hatten, ihr hattet, and sie hatten. Okay, then let's talk about word order. And again, word order, very simple because it follows the exact same word order as in the perfect tense. So your auxiliary verb should be in second position in the sentence, and your past participle goes all the way to the end of the clause. Okay? So let's look at what this looks like. This is a present tense sentence. Frau Ruf fährt morgen nach Berlin. Frau Ruf goes to Berlin tomorrow. Okay? first thing you would do, of course, when you talk about the distant past, you wouldn't say tomorrow, so you would replace morgen with gestern to talk about the past. And that's what I just did here. Okay? Now I said the auxiliary should go in second position. Because we have a present tense sentence here, we have the conjugated verb in second position. So that's where our auxiliary should go. Okay? And our auxiliary in this case is war, because the fahren, or fahren, what we have here is a motion verb. It has a direction. So that's why we use, of course, an auxiliary form of to be, sein. Okay? And this, of course, would be war. Now, we take our verb, kick it out, put war in second position, and of course then we still need to do something with this fahren. We move it all the way to the end, but also, of course, we have to change it into a past participle and not the conjugated form we have here. So instead of fahren, we say gefahren. Okay? And you get your entire sentence. Frau Ruf war gestern nach Berlin gefahren. Okay, so really I just want to make this point again. The difference between the plusquamperfect and the perfect is just that it goes back in the past one time further back, and then of course you change the auxiliary one step further in the past as well. So if you had a sentence like Frau Ruf ist gestern nach Berlin gefahren, this would be a perfect sentence. Okay? Frau Ruf went to Berlin yesterday. All you do to put it in the plusquamperfect, so to make it an even more distant past, is to replace the ist, the auxiliary, with war, because that would be the Präteritum form of sein. One more thing I want to show you is that oftentimes when you have the plusquamperfect, you actually have two parts to a sentence. One part talking about the near the past, and one about the more distant past, so the plusquamperfect. So for example, if you look at this sentence, after Mark Twain had lived in Munich, he moved to Heidelberg. You had the he moved, that's the closer past tense, and before that he lived in Munich. So that's why you have the had lived, and this is the sentence that would get the plusquamperfect. Okay? What's important about this is that you yourself think about not which comes first on the paper you read or the exercise you have to fill in, but really what makes sense, what was probably in the more distant past and what's in the closer past. And of course, you have to live somewhere first to then move somewhere else. I think that makes sense, but so please don't just use the plusquamperfect either in the first sentence or in the second, but think about which one makes more sense. Okay? And for the sentence then, you would get, nachdem Mark Twain in München gelebt hatte, zog nach Heidelberg. So the first one gets the plusquamperfect, the gelebt hatte, and then zog is just in Präteritum, the closer past. Okay, then I brought some sentences for you to practice on, and these are just to practice the idea of what happened first. Okay, so you should just look for cues, which one looks like plusquamperfect and which one does not. So for the two sentences in number one, ich kaufte ein Geschenk für meinen Freund and ich war zur Party gegangen. Which one would you say came first? And of course it should be ich war zur Party gegangen. And I tried to trick you there a little bit in terms of content, because usually you would buy a present first and then go to the party. But all you had to do is actually look for the tenses, and war gegangen is of course plusquamperfect. So that happened even further in the past. It happened before I actually bought a present. Okay? And you have kaufte, and kaufte of course is Präteritum, so that's the closer one. How about the next one? Mein Bruder war nach London gegangen, ging nach Prag. Which one happened first and is further away in the past? And it should of course be the first one. Mein Bruder war nach London gegangen, because that's the plusquamperfect. And then you get a Präteritum, ging nach Prag. And we have one more. Ich hatte angefangen, ein Buch zu schreiben. Ich kaufte einen Kuli. Which one would you say happened first, based on the tenses you see here? It should of course be the first one. Ich hatte angefangen is a plusquamperfect tense, whereas kaufte, again, is Präteritum. I bought a pen is closer then. Okay, if that makes sense to you, then we can do the second practice, and for this one you actually have to transform the sentences you see into the plusquamperfect. So now you actually have to build the plusquamperfect. Okay? The first sentence would be, ich gehe ins Kino. I go to the movies. How would you transform that to be in the plusquamperfect? First, you should think about your verb. You have the verb gehen. Which auxiliary do you need for that? Haben or sein? Gehen is a motion verb, so you would use sein. Okay? So you just conjugate sein for the ich form and put it into the Präteritum, so you get ich war. And then your ins Kino stays the same, but the gehen, again, has to move all the way to the end of the clause, and you have to use the past participle. And the past participle of gehen is what? It's gegangen. So you'd say, ich war ins Kino gegangen. Next sentence. Wir haben zusammen ein Buch geschrieben. This one should be a little easier because I already gave it to you in the perfect. So you already have the auxiliary and you already have the past participle. So what you have to do? Just change the auxiliary that's right now in present tense into the Präteritum, and that's all, and you already get the Plusquamperfekt. Okay? So all you have to do is say, wir hatten zusammen ein Buch geschrieben. Really that easy. Okay, and we have a third one here. Sie fahren am Mittwoch nach München. Again, how you want to tackle this when you put it in the Plusquamperfekt is you want to think about, is fahren a motion verb? Does it have a direction? And of course it does. So the auxiliary you want to use is to be, or sein, and you have to use that in the Präteritum form. Okay? And then you need the past participle of fahren, which is what? It's gefahren. And everything else stays the same. So in your second position, you get waren now. Sie waren am Mittwoch nach München. And you remember to put the past participle in the very end of the clause, so you get gefahren. Sie waren am Mittwoch nach München gefahren. Okay, I hope the Plusquamperfekt makes a lot of sense to you now. If not, email your teacher with questions. But I hope this already cleared it up a little bit for you. And thank you for listening.